Well, Derek Johnson, dude, it's so good to have you back on the Beyond Sunday podcast, man, to talk a little
Yeah.
worship and Jesus culture and surfing, all the good stuff. So, guys doing well, family's doing well?
Yeah, we're doing awesome, man. We had our littlest just turned 3, so I've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old now. So it's my wife and I, we're sliding out of the baby phase, which is it's kind of surreal. And we've since our kids are spread out, we laugh all the time. We're like, we've had 10 years of diapers and kind of sleepless nights. And in the midst of that, my oldest is right about the same age as our church here in Sacramento. So in September we'll hit the 10-year mark as a church. And so, man, no, I mean, right out of the bat, we came down here into church plant mode, becoming parents for the first time. So it's been quite the season, but family's doing great. So planted here. We just have a beautiful community, and you know how it goes after 10 years of doing church with people. We just start to put down some pretty amazing roots, and I think that's the thing that we love, that we're so passionate about, not only in some of the ministry stuff we've been obviously doing around the world for years, but even just to see a local community like really thriving here, and
Yeah.
watching a place where our kids are growing up in the Lord and just having a healthy church is not the experience my wife and I had when we were when we were growing up. So yeah, it's great, man. We feel really, really blessed to be a part of this team, and it's been cool to be running with the same people for such a long time as well. I think Jesus Culture is about to hit the 25-year mark as a ministry, and then like I
Yep.
said, 10 years for our church here. I think we're almost at about the 3-year mark for our San Diego church as well. So yeah, it's just awesome. I mean, it's also funny. We're like, wow, time has flown by. We moved down here. My wife was 8 months pregnant. We were going to start a church and have our first kid, and here we are, 10 years later, 3 kids, and but loving it, man. We absolutely love what we're doing. We love what we're doing in the church. My wife, about 2.5 years ago, probably since the last time that we talked, but so she youth pastored here for about an 8-year stretch, which is like 4 times longer than people youth pastor. It's very rare
Seriously.
that in youth pastoring someone passes the 2-year, but she did that for 8 years, and then 2.5 years ago stepped in as the executive pastor here at the church, and it's just been doing a phenomenal job really building culture with our staff and just kind of reworking systems, and I think clarifying the culture that we want to build. And it's one of those things that we navigate, and of course I do this in my worship team as well. But anybody who's leading teams, you understand that if you first of all have to have a pretty clear culture within the team, if that's ever going to go beyond that team and then to the people that we're serving at our church. So it's just been a really cool few years of focusing in on some of that stuff, and then
Yeah.
also kind of figuring out like what's going to be what are going to be the values or the clarity of this culture that's going to lead to longevity, that people can come in and it's kind of obvious, you can jump in and be a part of it. So it's been
Yep.
awesome, man. We're all in the trenches of local church, and we love it. And that's, like I was saying, I feel like, for us, part of it feels like what we get right and what we build right now is just going to be a tremendous benefit for even our kids. Like selfishly, we can look at that and go, whatever we do well here is going to also be the same house that our kids get to grow up in, and really serve the Lord, and get to know the Lord, and build community. So we love it, man. And then getting to do that with, we have, like I said, we have our campus in San Diego, and so much of that team, everybody on that team, were at one time up here, a part of this staff, and helping lead a bunch of the teams that actually went down. Where a ton of our youth leaders in our youth group went down at
Love
the
that.
early stages to help plant the church. And so it's just so cool, I think, to have all this same community of people just going after the same stuff, and just watching what God's doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you started with that, Derek, because I think most people probably know that Jesus Culture is a church, but it kind of started more,
Yeah,
at least kind of as people knew it from the music, like kind of an artist collective. But I love what you said, where you said, hey, it's great to be a part of a healthy culture, like a healthy church culture. And
yeah,
it sounds like that you've had some church experience in the past that was maybe less than healthy. We'll just put it like that. And I feel like
for
that is a
sure. Yeah,
very, just a topic that's at the forefront of people's minds, where there's just there's a lot
Right.
of unhealthy leadership and a lot of unhealthy churches and unhealthy cultures.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could just speak to, from your experience, what makes for a really healthy church culture? Like maybe you can break down Jesus
Mm,
culture, your church, and
sure.
what makes it really healthy from a staff to like the whole church.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, it's a huge question. Obviously, there's a lot of elements of that, but I think the first thing that actually comes to mind is some of the longevity of these relationships. Like you said, like when this ministry started, it was the youth group coming out of Bethel Church. Banning's heart initially was, I feel like the Lord's saying, let's gather some people, let's get together and worship, and really was thinking, how can we serve some of maybe the other youth groups in the area that aren't ever connected to one another. And so he just had this massive heart to figure out how could I serve some churches just in the local area that he was in at the time. And, what that began to snowball into were these really impactful conferences where we would come together wherever we were going. The heartbeat was always the same. We believed that if we made a place for God to come and show up, if we came and ministered to the Lord, he would encounter people. And if you had an encounter with God, you were going to be transformed. Not if you had an encounter with our worship or our great songs or our great speakers, but if you came to the event, if you came to the place where we came to meet with God and you actually met with God, you were going to leave different. And so, we've had the same crew on that mission for decades now. And so I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is that obviously we've all matured as individuals. Like I was alluding to earlier, we came down to plant this church. We hadn't had kids yet. We were at the same time we were taking on these leadership roles. We also were becoming parents, and it's hard for me to detach the maturity that I think begins to fill our lives the moment that someone else matters a whole lot more than you do. But I think honestly, that's a huge part of what started to add a ton of health even to our culture was, we weren't any longer just kind of a collection of artists doing these conferences or whatever. The mission was always the same. But once that was transformed into, we actually have a congregation who is here, that's here with us weekly, that we need to pastor, that we're walking through just life stuff. Like even now, I'm about 5 years into the worship pastor role. I was certainly meeting with people and pastoring people well beyond just carrying that title because it's a part of being in local church. But again, just that longevity of we're here walking with people. And then for our staff or our leadership, we have decades of friendship and relationship. And also, and this is probably where I think the church is wrestling with this now. Of course, when there's bad and abusive leadership, you aren't you have no requirement to stay under that.
Right.
But what's it look like though when you're navigating leaders who are imperfect, who are growing? Well, there is something to be said about being able to stick it out with one another and work through issues and be honest with each other. And I would say that, one of the key features of even our team, just internally, the part that people would never see or know about, is that permission to be honest with one another. Like, how far are we going to actually get down the road if I can't come to you and say, hey, whenever you do that, it feels dysfunctional in this way? Am I off? Are you off? But we're going to have some kind of an open and honest communication here so that we can figure out how we're going to move forward. And also so that whatever that mess is doesn't start leaking out on all the people who are trying to lead us and follow us as well in our leadership. So I think that's something we've committed to as a team and as a staff, is just trying to be as honest with each other as we can, and then to be humble with one another. That I mean I know in my own journey, this is why again I'm like, parenting really helps in this, because
So
the
many
moment that I
parallels.
feel like 100%, like the moment I feel like I am just crushing it as dad, my wife will come in with this beautiful balance of going like, hey, like that's awesome, but here's something that maybe we're missing that the kids need. And I'm like, I could fight against that. I could have all my defenses against that. I could be insecure in that, or I could actually yield to what my wife's bringing in and go, oh, you're right. What am I missing there? what could we do better? And so I think that just that humility in our team is something that we all fight for. We have to fight to protect that. You know, you can be as humble as you want to be or not. It's like that really is a personal choice. Can someone on your team or can leadership, and they approach you and say, "Hey, what if we tried it this way?" Or when you showed up in the meeting like that, you know, that didn't rub anyone the right way. So I think that's been a huge part of it. And then, like I said, I think as people even come in and they get to be a part of our church or our team, again, these are relationships where I've walked through some of the hardest seasons of my life with my senior pastors in my corner, as not
Mm.
just the people who are there as like church leadership, but as the people I call when I'm like, hey, I've got a crisis at home right now. You know, I've got a sick kid that's going to the hospital or whatever. Like, help me. What do I do? I think just having that, like that's real. That's the foundation of what we're kind of building even this church on and certainly the thing in San Diego as well. So, you know, I think that part of longevity, people feel that. And again, it comes at a cost. So we've had to work through actual issues together when
Yep.
it would have been easier to say, you know what, I don't like this or I don't like that, or maybe this would be easier somewhere else. I think that's kind of the first question we ask when you're part of a church. So all of that to say, even speaking to people who are in church leadership, maybe other worship pastors or leaders, I'm like, you're going to have to fight for that connection with your pastor. You're going to have to fight to be submitted to your pastor when you'd rather do like the four songs that you absolutely love that you think are going to move the church, and your pastor's like, I don't see it.
Mm.
Okay, what do we do? And I think if you can actually work out that difference and get a unified vision that is that, you know, it's give and take, man, you're gonna be you both are gonna be so incredibly happy that you
Yeah.
worked through that stuff.
Yep.
And then I think people feel that. So I think there's the caution for all of us in church leadership, which again, maybe this has just been my journey. I've been a part of three churches since I've been saved, and every one of them I thought I'm here for the rest of my life. And then the Lord would open up situations or doors, and we'd move on to the next place or whatever. But the point is, and every one of them left those places honorably. I was there for how I could serve and really strengthen the house. I really wasn't there for whatever opportunity I was going to get. I was there to serve. And so I think us just having that perspective and I guess the last thing I would say on that is again, none of this is ever to make any excuses for where there are abusive and dysfunctional leaders, and of course that exists. And so, yeah, when those things are obvious, I'm like, feel free to move on and get out from under that stuff as quickly as you can. But you know, we should be very thoughtful about what that actually is. Just because a leader does something that you don't like or that challenges you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're being abusive. Maybe you're immature. Maybe you have some areas in
Oh,
your life
you're
that you need to
preaching
grow
now,
up.
Derek. Look out.
Right, right. You know, so I think that can be the challenge. And I, you know, I say this is like I was a quintessential sensitive, creative artist guy who was like, I probably know a lot more about worship and what sounds awesome and great and what's awesome musically than my pastor. So why is he not listening to every brilliant idea that I have? And there's something about us being able to humble ourselves to realize, man, you know, they're leading the environment. They're the ones that have to come up and preach after we do whatever we're doing. Danning as my senior pastor, him and I years ago, when we were back at Bethel, and again for people who didn't maybe know this, Jesus Culture, as we were doing conferences and stuff, Bethel Church was our home church. So we were all coming and serving on Sundays and you know, Friday nights and all the different things that were happening. And early on, I remember the church is kind of growing and the school was growing and things were expanding. And so Banning was leading up like a little satellite campus there in town, just kind of be a bit of an overflow. But we didn't want it to just be a random room that people jumped in. We wanted pastors to be present. We wanted to have like live worship and so him and I partnered up even years ago to go there and like, hey, let's add some consistency and work together. And right there from the very beginning, and that was, I mean, that was like 13, 14 years ago. I was there figuring out how can I get behind and serve what it is that you want to bring to this spot with what I bring as a worship leader and as pastor and all those things. And so I just think getting lined up behind people that way is huge. And again, just to reiterate it, it can be kind of easy, I think, to bounce around to places where it's most comfortable. It's hard to stay planted somewhere. It's actually hard to stay planted and to grow through your weaknesses and maybe even to admit that you have some and start to figure out how the pastors and leaders in your life could speak into them. Doesn't mean you're always going to agree or that you're going to have some gigantic metamorphosis about who you are, but there's probably some rough edges on you that won't be as confronted if you just jump to somewhere else. But if you stayed where you were at and you're in relationship with people long enough, you build enough trust where they get to come up and go, hey, maybe you could try to not do that.
Yeah.
And you want that, you know, and it's part of what we find in marriage is like the depth of our relationship and honesty with each other. My wife and I have been married for 15 years now and like dating for 20. She's my best friend in the whole world. She's also the person who will hit me with the most honest truth that I desperately need to hear, that I usually don't want to hear. It's like the reality, right?
Tension is like unavoidable in ministry and when you're
Yeah,
on a team, but tension doesn't have to lead to toxicity. You
that's
know,
right.
it's what you
That's
said,
right.
like humility, like to approach meetings and conversations and relationship with, hey, I love you, we're in this together. And I think what tends to go when it gets like off kilter a bit is the sort of backbiting and gossip that happens, you know, behind the scenes
Right.
when you're no longer like face to face and like, hey, let's talk this out, you know. That's just huge, man. So Derek, I want you to talk about being a worship pastor, and the sort of the broad question is, what do you
Mm,
think it takes to be like a great worship pastor? And I wonder if maybe
mm,
you could answer that in this way, like what are you doing now as a worship pastor that you wish you would have done when you started in ministry?
mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Man, I think, I mean, this will sound kind of funny because it's not going to mean that it wasn't present in the beginning, but I think just a real understanding of holiness. It's
Hmm.
something that we've constantly been working through with our team. And it's something I talk about them all the time because I think in the early days, and you know, even in my own journey, I was like 17 years old when I first really got saved and I was jumping into the church. And it's safe to say I knew absolutely nothing about like church culture, Christian leadership. Even back then, like the thought of being like a worship artist that didn't even exist. It was like maybe like on a Sunday morning we all were singing Indescribable by Tomlin, you know, and it was like all the Tomlin songs. That's what we had. That was like everything that we were
Right.
leading. So the thought that like to see where things have grown now, and the reason I say holiness is because I like I had been a lifelong musician. I had aspirations to do music full time. You know, the funny little shortcut terms to be a rock star. That wasn't exactly the thing, but I did want to do music professionally. I loved music. I loved the art form. I loved all that. And then it was amazing because as I jumped into church and had like legitimate transformative encounter with the Lord, where I was like, I want to give my entire life to Christ and I just want to see his kingdom on the earth. Like whatever that looks like, I'm all in. But then I had this interesting little tension of, but I've spent my entire life doing music, and I was actually super reluctant to get involved with worship because everything that I had known previously about music was it was like there's a part of it that's almost more honest when you're like, hey, I'm a creative and I want you to notice me. I want you to celebrate me for my talent. I want you to see my skill. I want you to hear my awesome song. I want you to applaud me. I need you to see how talented and special I am.
Right.
And I don't say that callous. I'm like, that's what I was striving for as a young artist and a creative. And so when I came into the church, I had this kind of obvious understanding. There's something so holy about the Lord, and there's something so special. And I felt reverent about what was happening in worship as part of how I began to really encounter God was like, man, here's these people who were sold out. I was in a vineyard church when I got saved, so they loved to worship. And there
Yep.
was like flags and shofars, and it was wild, but they loved God.
Mm.
And I remember thinking like these people are either totally crazy, which, when I first was walking in, I was like, I think that they are, but man, I'm so drawn to it. I can't help but lean in and just speak, like, what's going on here? And so, man, just seeing that kind of journey where I couldn't avoid like moving closer and closer and closer to wanting to worship the Lord. Also in the back of my mind was also just, so I say this idea of holiness was like, I don't think the Lord needs a bunch of talented musicians to come and serve the church. I think the Lord needs a bunch of priests who want to come and minister to God. Like,
Wow.
I think that's actually the call. He wants to restore the priesthood in the church, that we would actually come. And I love, this is the thing that we've even navigated here. And when you were asking like, what's been some of the things going after as a worship pastor, it was that I'm actually less concerned with how skillful and talented you are. And for us as a ministry, even just as having the reputation of Jesus culture, we had a pretty high standard on what it means
Right.
to come and be a part of our team, just on the musical skill side. We didn't just let anybody on the team or anybody up there to play. But I remember having this deep conviction that we better have an even higher standard for the character of the people who are coming on to this stage. And because of that, it also meant that there were certain people, and this is always the tension where it's like, well, maybe their skill isn't where I would want it to be, but their heart and their passion for the Lord and their desire for holiness is exactly where I want it to be. So let's help grow their skill. Because we can do that. Like, we're good musicians. We can figure out how to do that. We can
Yep.
we can teach that skill. And I think anybody who comes in, this is probably like, this is why it matters how you vet people that get on your team. It's like don't let people on your team who don't care how good they are. That's silly. You want to obviously make sure that you don't just let people on who they probably care more about how well that they do on the skill side than I could ever give them feedback for.
Yeah, that's good.
So we want people like that. It's like the funny thing, right? Like a set happens and someone hits a funny note and you're like, hey man, I'm give some feedback on that. And like, I know, man, I know. I had the cape on the wrong spot. I totally biffed that intro. I'm so sorry. It's like they're aware, and we want people like that who care. But also at the same time, it's like if I, as the worship pastor, make that the highest thing that we're protecting, that is what everyone will protect. That's the main thing that they'll care about and be concerned about, is how well their performance is and how well they nailed the part or whatever. And the thing that I'm fighting for, I don't always get this right. It's just the thing I'm fighting for, is that I want to make sure it's that call to holiness. It's that call to character. It's that call to pursuing Jesus. It's that call to have healthy marriages and be good moms and dads and be contributors to our church. Like, that's the part that I'm like, if we can come and fill our people up with that, we can handle the skill stuff. We really can. You can fix that. And at the end of the
Yep.
day, this is the little secret that all of us know who are doing worship regularly. 85% of the congregation has no idea when you hit the weird note. They just don't. They're not all
They don't
musicians.
really care as much as
They don't
we
care.
think they do.
That's exactly right. They don't care, and they're not thrown off. And like, even if they did know, they probably have a nice little giggle and they move on, right? Because and honestly, think about this. Is that what we want them to care about? We want to be bringing our congregations in to go, hey, whether we hit a weird note or not, we should all probably be thinking about ministering to the Lord. We're not
Yeah,
super
so good.
worried about the flow of this service and whatever. And so I think I think the conviction that we had was, if we're going to call the congregation to that, we certainly have to call our team to that. And so that holiness actually matters. I think this is the part where it's like, why would we go after like emotional health within the team? Well, because if my worship team is fractured and disconnected and has all these little inner grumblings going on, like, how does that not affect what happens in worship? Now, God's sovereign and amazing, and he covers us in all of these things. But also at the same time, like, that affects us individually. We all feel that. If you've ever gone
Yep.
into, if you had some kind of a disconnect with a spouse or someone on the way to church and you're trying to shake all that off before it's like, that's real. We are real people. We are emotional people. So creating even those healthy structures in our team has helped, I think, protect probably some of the reverence just around what we do. That when we get up there, our stage isn't like it's a holy place. We want to treat it that way. We want to step up there
Yep.
reverently. We want to come up and realize, hey, there's and like we laugh, we're friends. It's lighthearted, it's not like this heavy thing. It's that we take seriously what we do. And but also I've got a lot of young people on my team, and I see so much of myself in them. They're stepping into church. Oh, like honestly, for anybody listening to this, like remember for just a second that if you're on a worship team or you're leading, you're getting up on a stage in front of, a bunch of your peers every week. You're doing something completely crazy and courageous all the time. And so it also is an atmosphere that's ripe for insecurity. You're getting up there in front of people doing something. So it's easy to feel insecure. And I think for those of us who have the privilege to lead people and pastor people in that, I recognize when the 20 something comes up to lead on a Sunday morning, you know, all of the inner dialogue and the stuff that they've got going on, they're having to fight through just to get up there and courageously lead. That's why I want to make sure the environment's as healthy as possible. And that I also, even for them, it's like I'll do this with some of our younger leaders. I'm like, hey, the main thing is we're getting up there to minister to the Lord. Like, don't
Yep.
worry about it. I know, yeah, you had a cold this weekend, and you're certain your voice is gonna, like, it's fine. Take some ibuprofen. You'll sing through it. You'll be fine. Like, just filling them with courage to get up there and do this thing that I think if you've been doing it long enough, you kind of take it for granted. You step up there and do that. It's not something I feel super insecure about anymore when I get up to lead. But I also realize that's been decades of a journey where I felt so insecure. I always laugh telling my younger leaders. I remember when I was serving at Bethel, and so many of you could probably relate to these moments. Get like I'd get an email invite for the planning center or whatever, and I would say yes to it, and then for like 2 weeks, I would sit there absolutely stressed out between now and the time that I was leading, going like, why did I say yes? Like I could have just said no, and I wouldn't even have to worry about getting up there and leading in front of those. Like, like we have to be honest. I think that we navigate those feelings, we navigate those things, because when we do that as leaders, we can turn around to the young people coming behind us and say, hey, some of that's normal, and also you can be very much free from that by not worrying about what people think, by remembering why you're doing it. And to me, that is part of that call to holiness, is that we consistently are casting those things off so that when I get up there to lead worship, what I really want is a tremendous amount of attention and clarity and focus on the Lord, and
Yep.
all the millions of things that we could be thinking about and be distracted by when we're up there, they fade, and I just get to minister to the Lord.
In some ways, there is like you want to have a little bit of that fear. Like when you get
Yeah.
the planning center request, like some of that is healthy. Like I really care about this, and I'm going to
Yes.
take it seriously, because some might decline that planning center request, you know, for years and years and never step
That's
out.
right.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes. Yep.
and then the other side is like the more confident you get, like the less or the easier it is to like not rely on the Holy Spirit. Like that's what I battle,
That's right.
is like I've
Yeah.
led
Yeah.
worship for like a couple decades now. And so I know enough about worship leading that I can put together a set, and I can step out there with a good band, and I
Yeah.
can say the right things, and I can sing the right songs, and I can get celebrated. Wow, that was amazing worship. But in my heart, like I was distant. I wasn't like desperate for God or dependent
That's
on the
right.
Holy Spirit. So we got to protect like
Yep.
both ends of this thing. You know what I mean?
No, that's right. No, it is. It's a good caveat to that, because it's funny. Like even I think back to, I knew that internally, like I didn't want to say yes, and I had all my nerves about it, and so I'd force myself to say yes. Because you're right, it's like we do have to get up there. You do need to answer the call, and you're going to wrestle with a bunch of stuff in doing it. And then there is the other side of the spectrum, which is yes, I know how to prep a great set. I know exactly how it would flow well to open it up, how we would
Yep.
land it, everything in between. And also, if you've been in a culture like ours, I'm like, oh, I could slide in a couple spontaneous moments in there. Like we know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the beauty of being able to, like I'll even say this to our younger leaders is like that's good. To me, that's kind of similar to learning scales on a guitar. Like that's great. You're gonna need to know how to do that. You need to know the form, and then you have to be absolutely ready to just break those rules completely. It's one of our favorite things too. Is we have about a year and a half ago. I guess it's about a year and a half now. We started these Tuesday night prayer nights here at the church, and it was just a time to there's no clock, there's no service flow really. It's a time to show up, and we would pray corporately, and we would worship. And I think, and this is against my will for sure. Every time I got up to lead one of those, I'd have like a nice set that was laid out because I'm doing this long enough to have these moments with the Lord where it's like, God, I've made a great plan. Derek has made a great set, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. You just
Put
have
this
to be
set
yielded in
in
that
the
way.
museum of worship leading. It doesn't get any better than
That's
this set.
right. That's it. This is the greatest set I've ever thought of. And we would never leave the first key of the first progression. I mean, we would spend an hour and a half just in that spot. And I think, I mean, you're so right because we definitely have to speak to both sides of that. Is like, I don't ever want to lose that. I mean, that's what it's all about. Are those spots where I'm actually, like the best terminology I have for it is where I just feel lost in his presence. I'm really not overly consumed about thinking about where the room is at. Although we want to be great leaders, I want to successfully lead a congregation in worship. There's a part of that I feel like is pastoral work. How do you how do you guys learn how to sing the song of the redeemed? How do you learn how to do that? How do we minister to the Lord? But also at the same time realizing you can't lead the places that you haven't gone. And
Mm.
there's something about that where I think even as worship leaders, as worship pastors, we have to remember we have to kind of be pioneers in that. Like I have to keep fighting for that spot where I'm in that place of risk again. I'm in that place of faith again. That as I'm leading, like it's gonna, okay, Lord, you want me to go off the map completely? It's going to require absolute faith and trust in Him to do that. And it's funny because it's where all those same voices of insecurity kick right back in. Well, what's everyone going to think? I mean, they don't even know what I'm singing right now. This isn't even the words person doesn't have this because I'm just singing something spontaneously right now. These are all the thoughts that all of us are going to have and wrestle with. But just even the testimonial side of that is like what we've seen emerge just in the culture of worship in our church because of what we're going after on those Tuesday nights, because we've set aside these nights. And the cool part about it is those Tuesday nights have become a place where a lot of even my younger leaders or up and coming leaders, this is where they're cutting their teeth. They're getting to
I
learn in
love
that
that.
spot of just
I think
worshiping the Lord.
more teams need avenues like that. Like not enough
Yeah,
teams do. It's all Sunday,
yeah,
and when it's
yeah.
all Sunday, you leave out like a huge discipleship opportunity.
That's right.
Because
Yeah,
I mean, we get it. Like Sunday is it's game time, like that's where you want
yeah,
your best people and all of that. But like there are
yeah,
other
100%.
avenues and environments for discipleship to happen that I think it's a missed
Yeah.
opportunity for a lot of leaders. So I love to hear that you're doing that. That's awesome.
No, you're right too, and I think like we're all reading the stuff that's happening in worship right now, and the books and all the podcasts and all the stuff. Like, I think we all can be honest about the fact it's very easy for us, especially in the worship space. And you're kind of getting at it a little bit, right? Like, we could have a cynical view of the clock on Sunday and the service flow on Sunday. And I would just, this is why like our Tuesday's been so helpful is that yes, we do actually have a spot where we aren't worried about what's happening for kids ministry. Because if you're actually going to get into serving the congregation well, yeah, it matters that people have a place they can bring their kids and come and worship and hear the word and pick them up and get them to lunch and do all the things that actually have to happen so that we can serve the church well. And so I think it's been this for us having that Tuesday night. I know it's helped in just our worship culture to go, oh man, we actually really value and honor like the flow and the structure of what has to happen on a Sunday morning so that we can serve as many people as we can, as best we can. But we're also making sure, like you said, we've got these other avenues. Like we've got our Tuesday night where you can come and there's not a clock on the wall and there's not kids ministry that we're worried about. So let's come, let's worship. This might extend out way past the time that we thought it would. And it's also a beautiful place. Like I had a huge value for it because when I first was starting to even, music at church and lead worship and all of that, the church I was a part of had a Friday night prayer night that was the same vibe. And so I was getting to lead worship in a spot where there wasn't a service flow or anything. And I had all of this freedom to just honestly come and just be open and worship the Lord.
Yep.
And it's been huge. And the cool part is to see how that's actually translated into, I felt like just an increase in the heart of worship on our Sunday mornings. So it's,
Yes.
it's like two sides of the same coin.
Right.
I agree. Like a lot of the places I'm speaking to, a lot of the churches we're connecting with, somewhere within the church, they're starting up either like prayer rooms or they're just having a space to worship, or like our San Diego campus, they do like encounter nights. It's just a night to come and have
Yep.
that space that is separate from the Sunday morning. I think it's a great encouragement, man, even for churches out there. And maybe your team doesn't have that. Maybe it's not something that you feel that even leadership feels like they have a vision for. And, maybe you're one conversation away from starting that up. Maybe you're one meeting with your pastor and saying, hey, it'd be cool to have a spot where night a week or once a month we could come and just worship for an hour. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. So I think
Yep.
even for us, like as the worship teams in the church, like if it's not happening in your church, have honorable conversations, come with some vision and share why maybe you'd want to have something like that.
So you're saying even Jesus culture is kind of aware of the clock on Sundays? That's even with you
That's
guys,
right.
huh? That's encouraging to the
That's
rest of us.
real. It's real.
I feel
Yes,
like
it's real.
I feel like the term, we don't have to be like Jesus culture is like a common like worship term like around the world, like meaning like not every song has to be 15 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, that's right. That's right.
so there's even a way too to do spontaneous moments that they don't necessarily have to be long to be powerful. Like even in a worship
That's
set on
it's
Sunday
true.
where it's like, hey, let's linger
Yeah.
here for like 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it is, or
Yeah.
even shorter, to just give a little breath to the set. Whereas like a worship night, like you're talking
Yeah.
about, you can have a little bit more kind of unhinged freedom to just go
That's
for it,
right.
you know?
It's true, man. And even on our Sunday mornings, I mean, one of the things that we do just practically to try to set it up that way was like, let's say because we all kind of know the 5 to 6 minute length of a song, right? We all know like we all know how long the multi-tracks arrangement is. Like well, these are the things that we all know. We can be honest about those things. So we would know like, okay, if that maybe had space for 5 songs or something, we would intentionally go, well, why don't we plan for three so that we actually have to make sure that we aren't rushing through spots, that we allow ourselves some time at the end of songs to lean into moments and then just be open and be
Right.
open for the spontaneous song or be open to go to those spots. So yeah, there's such practical things you can do on a Sunday morning where I think if we get in a mindset that tells ourselves, I don't have 50 minutes of like unchecked worship time. The Holy Spirit can't move. I mean, that's not true. One of the beautiful things I learned about getting to go and travel to all sorts of different churches and lead worship was, yes, I'd go somewhere and they'd be like, hey, you've got an hour and 30 minutes. Okay, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And then I'd go
Yeah.
somewhere and they go, hey, you have 25 minutes on a Sunday morning. I'm like, okay. In those 25 minutes, like if you approach those 25 minutes like you're already defeated and you can't get anywhere in worship, you probably won't. And so I remember showing up into those situations going, I've got 25 minutes. Awesome. I'm gonna I'm gonna fight to connect with the Lord as genuinely as I can, like 1 minute into this thing. And that is possible. It is possible. And so I
Yeah.
totally get where we obviously have to have conversations about how difficult that can be. And so, of course, there's the other side of the coin where people are like, I've got maybe very green worship leaders who are trying to figure this out, and I'm shoving them into a 25-minute box, and I'm saying, great, let's have something really super powerful happen. Those would be the sorts of things, like, again, I'm talking about open conversations with staff. These are the
Yes.
sorts of things that we all get together in a room and go, is that the best possible setup for what it is that we want? And so having those conversations are massive. What's our target? Well, we want people to encounter God on a Sunday. Awesome. What's the setup that we probably need to have that happen? And then to ask the hard questions and sort that out as best you can.
Yeah, I've been in worship environments that are 10, 15 minutes long that were incredibly powerful. And I've also been in hour and a half
Yes.
worship times where it's like, this is kind of weird and self-indulgent and like confusing and like,
Yes.
what are we even doing? You know what I mean? So that it's not a time thing.
Exactly.
Like, sure,
It's not
there's,
about the clock. Yes.
it's really not. And I think your skill as a worship leader, like you should be able to, and I know we're all at different journeys in our, as a worship leader, but you should be able to lead effective and powerful worship in 10 minutes as well as
Yeah.
like, and it takes a different kind of planning if you're planning like an hour and a half set, and those are just two different, but no matter the time constraint, it's like, how can I help people to encounter God in these moments? So
Yeah, absolutely. And man, and I think one last thought on that, and it for me it does kind of tie back to holiness. And you asked the question earlier, what would you have probably done in the beginning? And this would actually probably be the thing. Like I think sometimes the thought that comes to mind is sometimes we're doing. Sometimes I think the worship leaders and the team they're doing an hour plus worship set because it kind of took them that long to get reconnected with the Lord.
totally.
If we're honest about this, sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's a great little analogy is like, my wife and I, if we're having consistent date nights, then it takes like 5 minutes to be out the door before we're in the flow. And we're connected, we're talking, we're picking right up where we left off last week. Like we're there. If we've stretched that out over a month or 2 months, we'll find ourselves on the ride to a restaurant somewhere going like, man, we're just trying to catch up on all the details of our life that we aren't really sorting out well. And it takes us that long to get to a place of like emotional connection. And so I think what I would have done better when I was a younger worship leader, which is something that it's a non-negotiable in my life now. Every day I'm in the Word,
Mm.
without a doubt. I don't care if I feel like it. Actually, my feelings are disconnected to whether that happens or not. I'm in the Word every day. I am seeking the Lord daily. I'm also consistently trying to refine my life, whether it's in actions or in attitudes, to be purified and holy. So that when I do walk up to lead worship somewhere, I'm not trying to sort out my walk with God. I'm not trying to deal with maybe even some unrepentant sin. I'm not all worked out because we're humans and we're navigating this stuff. I'm not
Yep.
trying to like figure all that out 10 minutes before I get up to lead worship and having the internal dialogue
We've
of
all
whether I
been
should be
there
up
though.
here or not.
Quick
We've
repentance
all been there.
before you run up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's part of the reason it's like, look, as we really make sure we're living a mature and healthy life with the Lord, then when I get up to lead, if you give me 25 minutes, I'm going to have 25 minutes of connected time with God because I am
Yeah.
connected with God. And I think that's that part that, and man, none of that, absolutely none of that is to be condemning. It's to try to be human with everyone who's listening to this, is that you're in these roles, you're sorting this stuff out. You've got marriages and relationships and jobs and all of the stuff. And as the pressures of life come, just read the Bible for like 8 minutes. We are notorious for finding security and safety in so many other things besides the Lord, and it
Yeah.
always leads us astray. And so I think, for me, those early disciplines, I just didn't have them locked in great,
Yeah.
and they've become so enriching to even walking with God, leading in the
Hmm.
church, and my relationship with the Lord in worship. Which, it sounds funny to say it that way, but it's like to have that, a measure of purity around that, and just consistent connection. And even practically for me, it's looked like something I've tried to do is I certainly want to make sure that I'm worshiping the Lord more in private than I am in public. Like,
Yep.
if there's one clock that I'm watching, that'd be the one clock I want to pay attention to. Is that the only time I'm doing this is not when I'm up in front of people.
So
Probably
good.
a decent safeguard for all the worship leaders listening out there.
Derek, so much here, man. This is amazing. Like, just to kind of tie this all together, being an effective worship pastor. I feel like some of the things you said, just to reiterate, but it's like you want to have kind of a relational, like, in tuneness with your team members to know
Uh,
what they need. Like, how can you coach them better, right? And what you celebrate as a leader will perpetuate in your team. If
that's right.
all you
Yeah.
celebrate
Yeah.
is like creativity, which is great, or being tight musically, if that's what you emphasize most, that's what people are going to sort of take as this is what success looks like. But if you start to celebrate
Yeah.
character and time with Jesus and being in the presence of God, then your team is going to start to pick up on that. Like, okay, this is what matters here, and this is what I'm going to go after, right? And just knowing your team.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you have a team member, maybe they really do love Jesus, but they need to kind of, work on their click track tempo a little,
Absolutely.
play into the click, or,
Yep.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And just as a leader, sort of knowing like what to emphasize with different people at different times. And what's really encouraging to me, Derek, is that even a church like Jesus Culture is still doing just the hard work of just relational, building up young people, getting them plugged in, training
Yeah.
up the next generation. Because you kind of think in the back of your mind, like, okay, if I really graduate as a worship leader, I'll just have an awesome team in a mega church where we can just show up and just crush it, right? And some environments are like that, but I
Yeah.
love that you guys are like, it's about discipleship. So many young people that like mentoring and coaching and
Yes.
sending out to campuses. And so anyway, this was really awesome, man. And I want to let you go here. We've been talking for a
Mm.
while. I had planned to talk all about your music, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit. But before that, like, any just last words on this sort of worship pastor discussion that you sort of want to punctuate our conversation with?
Yeah. No, man, you actually just touched on what I like. If I see something that it feels like the Lord is trying to beckon the entire church into, it's exactly what you just said. I think the even the lesson that I learned I've been doing this for 20 years now. The lesson that I learned early on is that it's exactly what you said. The thought was, oh, it's honestly becomes more of like a self-centered thought.
Yep.
Where could I land and be successful in whatever the me show, even though it's for God, like whatever, the way that we do that. And what I absolutely love about what I'm seeing from other people I'm connected to, and the thing that we're like, guys, for everyone listening to this, I'm telling you right now, the most incredible moments that I've had in all of my years of doing this and leading has been when the younger leaders, who some of them they were there serving with me and my wife as we were doing youth group, and I'm helping throw them back in there after they had like the worst Wednesday of their life and songs went sideways and whatever, and they're so discouraged and they want to quit and they never want to do it again. Watching those leaders grow up to now step up and lead on our Sunday mornings and watching them fly, that is so much better than the best set I've ever led. It's
Mm.
just
Yep.
infinitely better. And I think this is the thing, guys, that if we build our churches on our own personal ability and ministry, and we aren't actually discipling that, then what's the longevity of that? It
Yep.
ends with you. It ends with your ability and your skill and your anointing and all the stuff that we throw around. And that can't be the call. There's no longevity in that. So, like you were saying relationally, like part of the stuff I'm leaning into with my team is for the people I walk with closely and disciple closely, we talk about worship stuff 10 or 15% of the time. The rest of it is how they're doing with the Lord. The rest of it's how they're doing in their marriages and how they're
Yeah.
doing in their work life. And it's realizing like we're building, it's a slow process of building long-term relationships. And some of those people, man, they've become the most bought in, most effective, and most high character leaders I have. And so I think just making those investments in the very, very personal, it's like you said, if the highest value is your performance on a Sunday, maybe overly identifying when they do really well, and they're going to be absolutely crushed when they fail.
Yep.
And that can't be the environments that we're building. Them to be relationally connected, relationally healthy. And the other thing is this, and I think about this all the time, the leaders who I do that with, who I invest in and disciple and walk with, when I'm teaching them that's what we value most. And I've watched this happen now. And I've not even been doing this long enough to go like, I can't wait to see the fruit in 5 more years. But they turn right around and they do it with 3 or 4 people. And this is what, honestly, guys, what it means to make disciples is like, there are people I actually walk with. I'm walking through their hardest situations of life. And then they're turning around and doing that with other people. And the beauty is they all get to come in and go, great, like we're following Jesus, we're walking out life together. We're actually just trying to figure out how we can look more like Christ in everything we do. And we also happen to care a lot about worshiping God, and we're on the worship team. But it's not like I'm on the worship team and that does my whole spiritual life for me. It just doesn't. It doesn't at all. So I
Right.
think just again, we want healthy believers who are in the word, they love God, and they are great musicians. And like you said, that journey probably just is an encouragement to people like, so you know that even in our environment, we do definitely give tons of feedback around the skill. We
Yep.
do put a huge emphasis on coming prepared, get it right. When you get it wrong, we're going to review it with you and make sure that you nail it. But that's just as much as discipling them in the skill. The point is it's not the only thing that we do. And we put a higher emphasis on discipling them in Christ and discipling them in character and those things that I think have to be the higher value. So honestly, and we say this all the time, like a strong culture governs itself, right? So when we say the highest value here is that we're following the Lord, we're setting in services, we're reading the word, then even when someone steps outside of that, because it's part of the culture, I don't have to go and police everyone who's doing that. They'll have their buddy next to them going like, hey, that's not what we do here. We get
That's right.
involved. We jump, right? So that's why it matters that we get them right. And I spent like the first 3 years of our meetings as a team just talking about those things. That's all that we talked about. I didn't talk about the performance. I didn't talk about what we were going after on the technical side. We just talked pursuing God. We talked character. We talked serving. And I think I told the team this over and over again. I was like, if you're here for any other reason than to serve Jesus and not like to bring him your worship, like if you're here for me, if you're here for your own opportunity, if you're here for their community, if you're here for any other reason, all of those things are going to eventually let you down. You're going to burn out and you're going to be pretty bummed out at this team and this church. But if you're here because you want to serve the Lord, then you'll have a lot more perseverance when things get a little, rough, and they will,
That's
and they
so good.
do, and when you get challenged. So yeah, and just having that kind of clarity, keeping that in front of the team as often as possible has been huge.
Yeah. Well, Derek Johnson, this has been, man, I need to like listen to this again, take more notes, and apply some of this stuff. This has been really great. Real quick, before we go,
Yeah.
so talk about Jesus culture music a little bit, right? So I know Why Not right
Yeah.
now. We're probably like 10 months late talking about this record, but this is an incredible project, some really great songs.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to let people know about, like, hey, we have a new record coming out, we're working on this, or what do you want people to check out on that side of things?
I mean, some really cool stuff that will be coming up in the future. We do a My City Youth Conference every year. We started every year to do a pastors conference as well, where we gather hundreds of pastors from all over the country, all over the world. Actually, we're coming in, and then we just locked in our church for a couple of days, and we worshiped together. We sought God together, and we also just grabbed a bunch of moments from that. And same thing with our My City, and it's been really cool for us to kind of get some of those things up and running again post COVID. All churches, we navigated all that stuff. We were out here in California, so it went a lot longer and out here. It's been really cool between that stuff and our San Diego campus, just some of the different things that are coming on board, some of the different leaders that are jumping in with us, who I just can't wait for people to get to hear some of the songs that are coming up that we're writing and working on and leading at these different things. And then we're actually planning on this September. I referenced this earlier, but we will celebrate 25 years as a ministry, 10 years as a church here in Sacramento. And so
Incredible.
we're going to be capturing our next record at that conference, which is going to be awesome. So we'll have that coming up. But all throughout the year, there's a handful of different songs and stuff that we've just been capturing, again, at these My Cities, Pastors Conferences, stuff like that to check out. So, I think we're also trying to move into that space where some of the content and worship stuff that we're putting out isn't always reliant on an album release, but just different
Yeah.
stuff we're able to share up on YouTube and our Sunday mornings and those different things like that. So we're really pushing to get some more content out there. So I would just say, for anybody checking this out, if you've loved our worship, our ministry, and want to get tuned into that stuff, definitely hop on our YouTube channel. It's where we're sharing a bunch of new content and just cool moments that are happening at our conferences and our church services. And then keep a heads up for the new record we're going to record this year. And we're just excited to introduce you guys to some of the new worship leaders. And we're just going after it. The cool part about all the
Yeah.
songs and the stuff that we're doing, they're truly coming alive in a church. And I think that's what we're so passionate about seeing. I just believe, and God's been doing it for a couple thousand years, that he's moving through his church. He wants to build. Jesus said that he would build his church, and that's what we want to lean in and be a part of. So even the songs and the worship, all of it that we're releasing, for me, the safeguard is, if it's connected to our church, if it's happening in the context of a local community pursuing God, I feel really stoked about sharing that with people. And
Yep.
that's what we're doing, man. That's what we're going after.
That's awesome. Well, Derek, thanks for your faithfulness in ministry, man. I know my life has
Mm.
benefited so much just from Jesus culture over the years and
Oh,
your
man.
ministry. And I can probably speak for so many worship leaders that are in ministry today because of the ministry of Jesus culture and just what
Mm.
you guys have sort of
Yeah.
pioneered and what you've stood for, almost 3 decades now. So thanks for your time
Yeah.
today, Derek.
Oh,
And hey,
man.
let's do
Thank you
this
so
again.
much.
Let's make this an annual tradition.
Absolutely.
Do a podcast.
I love it.
So
I love it.
cool.
It's so much
Thanks,
fun.
man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.